Well, today is day 121 of the war in Iran Donald Trump started and can't seem to get out of. In less than 2 weeks since Donald Trump signed the Memorandum of Understanding, both the United States and Iran have launched military strikes, even as Trump insists we're doing very well. That is what Donald Trump said in the Oval Office today after announcing U.S. and Iran negotiating teams are heading to Qatar.
We'll see how that goes, but we're doing very well on that front. But the meeting in Doha is going to be perhaps important, perhaps not. We're going to find out.
And that is Donald Trump downplaying the negotiations, despite posting today in all caps. Iran has requested a meeting. It will take place tomorrow in Doha. Despite Trump's post, the Associated Press reports one of Iran's senior negotiators denied talks had been scheduled, and the spokesman for Iran's foreign ministry said Tehran was sending its delegation to Qatar, a key mediator in the negotiations, to discuss terms of the interim deal without involving the U.S. The U.S. president has tried to preserve a fragile interim deal, but hostilities mounted in recent days in the Strait of Hormuz. After 4 days of trading strikes, both sides appeared to pause their attacks Monday. This afternoon, Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff briefed members of the House and Senate in a conference call. In a statement, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer called today's briefing, and I quote, delayed, deficient, and devoid of details. It isn't just Iran. Trump faced a series of significant defeats at the Supreme Court, and it's only Monday. Today, the Supreme Court rejected Trump's request for them to intervene in the civil jury verdict against him, which found him liable for sexual abuse and defamation against writer E. Jean Carroll. The New York Times notes the announcement by the justices did not include any reasoning, and no public dissents were noted. Donald Trump took to social media to respond to the Supreme Court's decision, calling E. Jean Carroll's lawsuit a, quote, fake case, and accusing New York State of creating a, quote, for an instant speck of time going back many decades in order to wrongfully nab me. It was tailor-made, and this injustice cannot be allowed to stand. And while the Supreme Court expanded some presidential authority over independent agencies, it rejected Donald Trump's relentless attempt to immediately fire the first Black woman Federal Reserve governor, Lisa Cook. In another defeat to Donald Trump, the Trump-appointed Justice Amy Coney Barrett wrote the court's majority opinion rejecting Trump's challenge to mail-in voting. Chief Justice John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett sided with the liberal justices, upheld a law that accepts mail-in ballots postmarked by Election Day, but received afterward. Trump responded to today's loss almost instantly by demanding Congress pass the SAVE Act, writing, quote, there is only one reason to oppose. Cheating, all caps, exclamation point. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie said this last week about Trump's obsession with elections.
I think it's ironic that we control the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the White House, and we're yelling election fraud. I mean, we won all the damn elections, and we're in charge, and what are we doing with it? We're bankrupting the country, we're starting new wars, we're violating the Constitution, we're not cracking down on the fraud. The problem is not the elections. We won the damn elections. The problem is we're wasting our opportunity that the voters gave us.
Leading off our discussion tonight, Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania. She's a member of the Appropriations and Foreign Affairs Committees. Congresswoman Dean, I am very happy to talk to you tonight because I want you to tell us what happened in today's Iran conference call with Rubio and Witkoff.
And this is an important day. And strangely, as we're taking in these Supreme Court decisions and the rant and raving of the president, we had a conference call. It was not a classified call with Secretary Rubio and Mr. Witkoff, and it was bipartisan, members of Congress, House members, Republicans, Democrats. Mr. Rubio gave a very brief opening, just talking about the shots back and forth over the course of the last 4 days, then sent it open to questions. We didn't learn much of anything. I have to be very, very honest with you. And it was all based on talking about the MOU, the 14-point MOU. I did ask a set of questions to the secretary and to Mr. Witkoff, which really piqued his ire. He cut my mic off and said that he called my question smart-assed and stupid, cut my mic off and said, "There's your answer." I was simply asking tough questions about who wrote the MOU, why does it sound so in favor of Iran, and from literally paragraph 1, we're already out of sync with what was to happen. I also mentioned the fact, and I think we should never forget, that in this reckless, unconstitutional war, which is what I said to the gentleman on the call, 13 service members have died. We must never forget that. Hundreds have been wounded and thousands of civilians killed throughout the region. But he called me smart-assed, stupid. I think this diplomat or would-be diplomat's been hanging around the president too much.
Wow. Did anyone object to the Secretary of State speaking to you in that manner at all?
On a chain for members, my colleagues were outraged, said it's unacceptable, disrespectful. Madeleine was simply asking tough questions. I added to the question, just to be completely transparent, and I think it's a fair question. I asked Mr. Witkoff, I said, in your work, how much of your work in the region is for the United States of America and resolving these issues, and how much of your time is being spent on your own ventures? That, I think, really ticked them off, and that's when I got cut off. My colleagues on a chain were very outraged. As I said, they cut off my mic. They had not done that to other people. So I didn't get to have a rebuttal.
Congresswoman, if Democrats retake the majority in November's elections, will they look into the dealings of Steve Witkoff in his sort of dual role as being an envoy?
I'm sure we will. I'm sure that it is a responsible oversight that we will do. You've seen the recent reporting around Mr. Lutnick and Mr. Trump and their sons. We have to have oversight into the corruption, the cruelty, the rubble, and the rot that is this administration. I want to pivot and just tell you where I just came from, which is startlingly different. I just came from a dinner, again, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats. We were invited to the Embassy of Qatar, and the ambassador of Qatar, Oman, and Saudi Arabia were there talking about the region and the change in the region as a result of this war in Iran. And they, to a person, said, "We don't want to look back. We are where we are, but we want to be responsible partners for peace." Responsible partners around Israel. They want to work from the basis of this MOU, number one, to get the strait open fully, and number two, to be sure that Iran does not get a nuclear weapon. So it was a jarring contrast. I'm talking with literally our alleged envoy and diplomat. They were not diplomatic with us. They were not forthcoming with us. And we had a very robust conversation at the embassy this evening.
Well, Congresswoman Dean, then on that point, do you feel like those allies you just had that dinner with, do they have a clear handle on where this situation with Iran is headed?
I think they have a very different handle, and they are quite united, at least in what they were saying to us. The GCC 6 countries are quite united in what they want to do in terms of prosperity and peace in the region. And they wanted us to understand how different it is, that Iran has attacked them as well, that they have had casualties and losses in the region. In particular, Saudi Arabia said, "We want Israel to be secure." We have always said that. This is what she said in terms of the presentation to us. But she said at the same time, the Palestinians must have a state. So they seem to be brokers for peace. I think there are going to be continuing talks, whether the president has it right or Iran has it right. There are continuing talks. They do believe they can build from the MOU and get the strait open.
And with that, we're going to have to leave it there. Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, as always, thank you for coming to The Last Word tonight.
Thank you, Jonathan.
And joining us now, MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin. Lisa, on Trump's losses in the Supreme Court today, on the E. Jean Carroll case, the court declined to take up Trump's appeal, effectively leaving the verdict in place. Is it over for Trump, or is there any avenue for him to get out of paying her?
Well, Jonathan, you'll remember that there are two E. Jean Carroll verdicts, and this concerns the first case that was tried. But ironically, the first case tried has to do with statements that Trump made after he was no longer president. It was the smaller, by far, of the two verdicts. The award here was roughly $5 million. But what this leaves for another day, and what the president hasn't even filed a petition with the Supreme Court yet about, is the second of the two verdicts. That led to an award of over $88 million for E. Jean Carroll on the grounds that while he was still president, when she first came forward, Donald Trump in July of 2019 denied that he knew E. Jean Carroll, that she was his type, and of course denied that anything had ever happened between them akin to the allegations that she made with respect to sexual abuse. So that remains for another day. With respect to that initial verdict, however, the jury's verdict that Trump not only defamed E. Jean Carroll, but that he sexually abused her, that will stay in place unless and until Donald Trump, for example, moves the Supreme Court for reconsideration. I find that highly unlikely to succeed, given here that there weren't even 4 votes among the 9 justices to even take up his case.
Wow. So then, Lisa, does today's decision signal anything broader about how the court is handling Trump-related litigation?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think we'll have to see. But I think that at the very least, what you can walk away with from today is that this is a Supreme Court that, while it has been very deferential to the president's conception of presidential authority, where we're not necessarily talking about presidential authority, or even when we are, there are going to be occasions where this court even is going to clip his wings. Even some of the justices he himself appointed and nominated to the bench aren't going to necessarily be automatic votes for him. The clearest indication of that, of course, is today's decision in the Lisa Cook case, where the majority included Justices Barrett and Kavanaugh, as well as Chief Justice Roberts and the 3 liberals.
Well, Lisa, on that on your last point, you just took away my final question for you. So Lisa Rubin, as always, efficient in answering the questions. Thank you very much for coming to The Last Word. And coming up, a major backlash is brewing after conservatives on the Supreme Court rolled back the Voting Rights Act again, with black voter turnout surging in the South. South Carolina Congressman James Clyburn joins us next. And we have an update tonight on the biggest ruling by the right-wing supermajority on the Supreme Court this year, the gutting of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which came down in April, just as primary season began in earnest. Now, many black organizers say they're seeing a backlash in the form of renewed energy at the ballot box. The Washington Post reports a surge in black voter engagement is energizing close Senate races in North Carolina and Georgia, where Democrats go into the summer with leads in many polls. Some Democrats see a chance of long-shot victories in South Carolina, such as ousting longtime incumbent Senator Lindsey Graham and flipping the congressional seat vacated by Congresswoman Nancy Mace. And South Carolina Republicans did try to advance a congressional map last month that critics argued would weaken black voting power in the state's only reliably Democratic district, represented by civil rights icon Jim Clyburn. And then turnout in the first round of primary voting surged to nearly presidential election levels. The Post reports in the district represented by the state's lone black congressman, Congressman James Clyburn, turnout jumped by more than 50%. With 4 months until Election Day, the question isn't whether black voters will show up. They've long been the backbone of the Democratic coalition. The question is whether the Democratic Party will invest the time, resources, and organizing needed to build on that energy, because protecting voting rights can't rest on black voters alone. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman James Clyburn of South Carolina. He is a member of the House Appropriations Committee. Congressman Clyburn, thank you very much for being here. After the Supreme Court's recent voting rights ruling, many expected black voters to become discouraged. Instead, they're fired up. Why do you think that's happening?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Jonathan. African-American voters in this country are very aware of the history of denying and suppressing the vote. And therefore, they are energized because they are determined that we will not go back to that sordid history. That's why you see this surge all throughout the South, and I think it's going to continue into Election Day. And you may recall when this issue was being discussed down in South Carolina, the Republican leader of the South Carolina Senate warned the White House as well as his fellow Republicans. All you're doing here is energizing the African-American vote, and it's going to put all of us at jeopardy. And that's exactly what is happening. And so I'm very proud to see what is going on, and I think it's going to continue through November.
Well, Congressman, let me read you a note of caution that comes at the very end of that Washington Post story. And I'm going to read it to you now. John H. Hamilton, 71, a disabled military veteran sitting across the shop and carrying a plastic bag containing his prescription medication, said he wanted to vote, but had no way to get to the polls. These are folks who voted in a primary election, but forgot about the runoff. Do you believe party leaders are doing enough to make protecting voting rights a central priority heading into the midterms? Are they doing enough to make sure that the Mr. Hamiltons out there are able to vote, especially if they want to vote?
That is certainly the case with Mr. Hamilton and several other incidents recently and in recent years. The fact of the matter is that we, on our side of the aisle, have allowed people to demonize what it takes to get people like Mr. Hamilton to the polls. We can talk all we want. We can have as many TV ads that you've got out there, as many radio ads. We can write as many letters as we can possibly write, send out cards. But if we don't put in place the kind of boots on the ground mechanisms to get people like him to the polls, we are going to pay for it dearly. No, we have not done enough in recent years. In the last presidential election, we saw it in Pennsylvania, we saw it up in Michigan, and I was sounding a warning. And I'm sounding a warning here tonight. We have got to get back to the basics of getting people out to the polls, because these people want their prescription drugs, want to be able to afford their prescription drugs. They want to be able to afford housing. They want to be able to afford to send their children to post-secondary educations all throughout the country. And the only way they can do that is to elect Democrats. They want to elect Democrats. So we have got to help them get to the polls and stop letting people demonize our methods of doing so.
Congressman, this is an incredible warning you have just delivered to the Democratic Party, but I'm wondering, to whom is it directed? who's the person who should be listening to your words? Is it the chair of the Democratic National Committee, Ken Martin, or is it Democratic Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries or Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, or is it all of the above?
I never personalize politics. Politics is a team sport. Individualism will not get us to where we need to be. I'm talking to the team. I'm talking to every player in the team. Let's sit down, get organized, and get back to some basics. You know as well as I do that a lot of people say when you hire these retired people, maybe a retired maintenance worker living on Social Security, you hire him to drive his church van on election day. He organizes high school students and college students, knocking on doors in the communities. People have begun to demonize that kind of politicking, calling it walk-around money. That's not walk-around money. That's using the skills that these people have. We don't demonize the folks who sit down in air-conditioned offices and place TV ads to get 15 to 20% kickback on the amounts of ads that they place. What kind of money is that? They're using their skills. So let's use the skills of these people like Mr. Hamilton who want to vote and want to help other people vote. And that's what we've got to do. We've gotten away from that, and we have to get back to it and get back to it in a hurry.
Congressman James Clyburn, yesterday was Sunday, but you've delivered a sermon on a Monday evening. Thank you very much, as always, for coming to The Last Word.
Thank you very much for having me.
And coming up, Trump is furious that the Supreme Court ruled that mail-in ballots cannot be tossed out simply because of postal delays. That's next. Donald Trump is fuming about his loss at the Supreme Court today, which ruled that mail-in ballots postmarked by Election Day but received days later should be counted. The 5-4 decision to uphold Mississippi's grace period means that more than a dozen states with similar laws celebrated the victory for democracy with just months until the midterm elections. That includes California, which, with its 7-day grace period, as the Washington Post reports, has been a regular target of Trump and other Republicans who criticize the state's slow counting of late-arriving ballots and have used the gap to spread conspiracy theories about voter fraud. Donald Trump falsely accused California Democrats of trying to steal the governor and Los Angeles mayor primary races from Republicans. Our next guest, California's Attorney General, praised the ruling today, saying, quote, "The decision recognizes a basic reality. Mail delays happen. When people vote by Election Day, their ballots shouldn't be discarded because of those delays." Joining us now is California Attorney General Rob Bonta. Attorney General Bonta, welcome back to The Last Word. California has the most robust mail-in voting in the country. And during this month's primary, Trump told us exactly what he thought of California's elections. What are the implications of this ruling today on your state?
This is a great ruling for democracy. It's a great ruling for the right to vote, the fundamental right to vote, the right from which all other rights flow. And it's a really important ruling for the state of California that has robust vote by mail. We provide many ways, many days for eligible voters to vote. You can vote early, you can vote by mail, you can vote at a polling station, you can drop your ballot at the post office, at a drop box, at an early voting center, at a polling station. We think that removing barriers is good for democracy. When people participate in our democracy, we're strong, we're at our best. So this is a really important ruling for California because we have a law just like the law in Mississippi that was upheld, which says that if vote by mail ballots are cast timely on or before Election Day, if they arrive a few days after Election Day, they still count. You're not disenfranchised. Your vote is not suppressed. So it's a common sense ruling, but it's a straight up legal ruling, and it says that the federal National Election Day law does not prohibit states from doing what California and Mississippi do, which is count votes timely cast but arriving after Election Day.
Politico reports the Supreme Court today accepted an appeal from the RNC, and I'm quoting here, to consider whether Arizona can mandate a proof of citizenship requirement for those registering to vote, a decision that could carry significant implications for voting laws nationwide. Attorney General Bonta, how concerned are you about this and other challenges to elections Republicans are mounting?
Of course, we're concerned. My constituents are concerned. I think Californians and Americans across the country are rightfully concerned about interference by Donald Trump, by Republicans in our elections. It's what we've seen. Trump has advanced conspiracy theories that are a figment of his imagination, that are delusional, saying that he won the 2020 election. He's asked for 11,000 more votes from election officials in Georgia. He helped fuel an attack on January 6th on the appropriate certification of the win of the presidency of Joe Biden. He's seized ballots in Fulton County, and he's issued multiple, two executive orders attacking our elections that I and other states have had to strike down twice. So he is showing no limit to what he will do to attack and undermine our elections. So, of course, I'm concerned. We feel that if we're in a court of law with facts and law, we win, just like in the Watson case. And so we'll stick with the facts, we'll stick with the law, and we'll stick with standing up for the franchise and the fundamental right to vote for all eligible American voters.
Well, President Trump is still pushing to do things to the vote. He's still demanding that Congress pass his Save America Act that would severely restrict voting. Mail-in voting is crucial in your state, crucial in California. What would happen to voting in California if that bill were to pass?
The Save America Act is a solution in search of a problem. It is a voter suppression bill. It requires in-person proof of citizenship to register to vote. About half of Americans who are eligible to vote do not have a passport, could not satisfy that requirement. It also would potentially disenfranchise 69 million married women who've changed their names since their birth, or 60 million rural voters who don't live near a government office. So it is based on the myth of widespread voter fraud, which does not exist, and it restricts voting in many ways, including the potential to heavily restrict vote by mail voting in California. And look, unfortunately, California has always been a target for Donald Trump. We have thoroughly rejected him multiple times in elections in our state. We don't want anything to do with MAGA republicanism and his denialism, whether it be election denialism or his untethering from the facts. We like to vote. We like to determine our future. We want eligible voters to vote. We want to do it in many ways, in many days that are lawful. And we will continue to stand up for who we are, for our values, and for our future. And whatever Trump brings, whatever unlawful action he brings, we will continue to push back. We're not looking to pick a fight, but we will never back down from one either.
California Attorney General Rob Bonta, thank you very much for coming to The Last Word.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Coming up, one of the most closely watched House races in the country is unfolding in New Jersey, where the Republican incumbent has been largely absent from Congress for several months. We'll hear from the Democrat running in that race, Rebecca Bennett. She joins us next. With the losses stacking up for Donald Trump recently, the most consequential defeat of his second term would be the Democrats' potential midterm takeover of Congress. A recent Quinnipiac University poll shows 49% of voters nationally want Democrats to win control of the House of Representatives in November, 7 points ahead of the 42% who favor Republicans keeping the majority. One of the Democrats' top targets in November is New Jersey's 7th congressional district. Now, that district is currently represented by Republican Thomas Kean Jr., who's been MIA recently. The New York Times reports Mr. Kean was last spotted on Capitol Hill on March 5th. He spoke that day during a committee hearing and cast a crucial yay vote in support of funding President Trump's immigration crackdown and moving to end a government shutdown. Then he seemingly vanished. Mr. Kean's aides repeatedly insisted that he had no plans to abandon his re-election effort and that he was expected to return to work soon, even as they refused to discuss the medical condition that had sidelined him. A spokesman for Mr. Kean, Harrison Neely, said last week that the congressman was expected to return to Washington on June 30th, that is tomorrow. The Democratic nominee for New Jersey 7, former Navy helicopter pilot Rebecca Bennett, has not been hard to find. Here she is receiving the endorsement of fellow Navy veteran, Democratic New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill.
Hi, I'm Mikey Sherrill, and I am here with a fantastic candidate, Rebecca Bennett. She is somebody who has spent her life fighting for our country as a Navy helicopter pilot, fighting for our families. She's a mom and works in healthcare. I mean, this is a woman who is the full package. I always say, and again, maybe a little biased, that if you want to get something done, ask a mom and a helicopter pilot. And we got one right here in New Jersey.
And Rebecca Bennett joins us here on The Last Word. She is the Democratic nominee for New Jersey's 7th Congressional District. Ms. Bennett, congratulations on your winning the nomination. In her endorsement of you, Governor Sherrill said, quote, "This is a woman who is the full package." What does her endorsement mean for your race?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. And, I think that what I've heard loud and clear from people on the ground in the district is that they are looking for people that understand the challenges that we are facing and also that are going to be able to go get things done. And what I shared with people in the district is that, yes, I'm a former Navy helicopter pilot. I served in the military for over 15 years, and I've led missions in some of the most challenging environments that exist on this earth. I've led missions in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the night where there's no margin for error. And I'm also a mom, and I'm raising my 2 daughters here in the district, and I understand the challenges we're facing because my family's dealing with them too, and I have solutions to actually be able to address the issues that we're facing in this country.
Your opponent, Congressman Tom Kean Jr., is expected back on the House floor tomorrow. What has the reaction to all of this been in your district?
I'll say everyone really does, myself included, really do wish him well. What he shared is that he has a medical condition, and so I hope he's had a speedy recovery. But he has failed this district long before he went missing in March. He was the deciding vote on the One Big Beautiful Bill, which is why tens of thousands of people in our district are losing access to their health insurance. He was nowhere to be found when Donald Trump started yet another forever war in the Middle East. And all this time, he's been continuing to trade stocks and to make sure that he is profiting off of his position. And so to your point, this is one of the most important races in the country. And so it's going to take all of us working together to make sure that we're able to flip this seat. And so if folks are interested in learning more, they can go to my website at RebeccaBennettForCongress.com to find out more.
Now, your district is one of the few true swing districts left in the country. The seat has switched parties in the last 2 elections. Tell us a little bit about the voters in your district in New Jersey 7 and the issues that you think will be important to them this year.
A lot of the voters are exactly just like my family. A lot of us work in the private sector, and we just want to make sure we're leaving this country better off than we found it for our kids and the next generation. And what I've heard most from people on the ground is really 3 things. 1, we are living through a cost of living crisis in this country, and we have to make sure that we have pragmatic solutions to bring the cost of living down. 2 is corruption. We have got to get money out of politics. We need to end Citizens United. I believe very strongly we need to ban members of Congress from trading stocks. I've already divested all my individual stocks, even though, in contrast to what Tom Kean Jr. is doing, which is that he's trading stocks. And then finally, I believe people are seeing that we have this real desire for generational change. We need a new generation of leaders that understand the urgency of this moment and are going to act accordingly.
Rebecca Bennett, Democratic nominee for New Jersey's 7th Congressional District. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
All right, coming up, the Carolina Hurricanes united a state behind a Stanley Cup championship. But when their coach urged lawmakers to follow that example, North Carolina Republicans headed in the opposite direction. North Carolina Democratic Party Chair Anderson Clayton joins us next. The 2026 Stanley Cup winners made a stop at the North Carolina General Assembly last week after the Carolina Hurricanes captured hockey's biggest prize earlier this month. At the celebration, the Canes head coach Rod Brind'Amour challenged North Carolina lawmakers to do what his team has done, which is bring people together.
What I witnessed on Saturday at the parade was something very, very special, and I know you guys had a lot to do with organizing that and making it happen. But what I witnessed was a lot of people coming together and supporting us, but maybe people that wouldn't normally talk to each other were State fans and Carolina fans and Duke fans and whoever else fans coming together. That's the one thing that our team can do, is we can unify. And I don't know exactly, I'm not really into the political stuff. To be quite honest, I try not to be, because it gets frustrating when I watch, and I'm sure you guys are frustrated, and I don't know if it's this room that you got people on this side and people on this side, but it's amazing when I talk about what a team can do. When people can work together, what can actually be accomplished.
North Carolina Republicans ignored that call for unity and voted just days later to override Democratic Governor Josh Stein's vetoes on bills targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and expanding cooperation with federal immigration enforcement while the state's budget remains unfinished. In a statement, Governor Stein accused Republicans of choosing culture wars over politics, saying, as the legislature leaves teachers and law enforcement officers waiting for hard-earned and desperately needed pay raises, members of the General Assembly are stoking the culture wars that divide us rather than fulfilling their long overdue responsibility of passing a budget. It's time for them to do their jobs for the people of North Carolina. Joining us now, Anderson Clayton. She is the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party. Anderson, good to see you again. UVA's Center for Politics recently shifted North Carolina's Senate race from toss-up to leans Democrat. A big deal, since Democrats haven't won a Senate race in your state since 2008. What's driving that shift?
Well, we've got an amazing candidate this year with Governor Cooper on the ballot, and also an unknown Republican candidate who's only track record in North Carolina is a big oil lobbyist and someone who's only come to the table to represent special interest and corporate interest in North Carolina. And we know right now, with the congressional representation that we have in Washington, D.C., that's willing to throw the average North Carolinian under the bus for, a patting on the back from special interest groups right now. We need people that are actually going to go to Congress and fight on behalf of our best interest. And we know that Governor Cooper has done that throughout his entire history and career in North Carolina so far.
As you well know, we're now just 127 days from Election Day. To what extent do you think this Senate race will be a referendum on Donald Trump?
I think right now North Carolinians are tired of the uncertainty with politics right now, the rising health insurance costs that we're seeing across North Carolina. We were just out earlier in Mooresville and Iredell County. We've also been in Hickory and Catawba County earlier today, too, talking with voters about the fact that right now people feel that government is not representing them. And we know that this U.S. Senate race is the most important one in the country for making sure that Democrats gain back a majority to put a check on the administration right now that's prevented everyday Americans from getting what they need fulfilled. And so I really anticipate people being very all eyes on North Carolina this year because we're going to make sure that we deliver for the people, but we're knocking doors and making phone calls every day to do just that.
Knocking doors and making phone calls. I don't know if you had a chance, if you were able to see South Carolina Congressman James Clyburn on the show earlier expressing some frustration about get out the vote efforts on the part of Democrats writ large to get out the vote, particularly among African Americans. Do you share his concern?
I think right now we have an amazing candidate with Supreme Court Justice Anita Earls in North Carolina. She is the only Black woman on the top of the ticket and across the bench in North Carolina that's on either our state Supreme Court or Court of Appeals. And we've got to make sure that we keep her there because we know that right now Black representation in politics is dwindling at the hands of Republicans who are trying to disenfranchise and disregard Black voices in our party, and making sure that we keep that representation on the Supreme Court in North Carolina this year is only going to help us make sure that in 2028, we take back the North Carolina State Supreme Court to repeal partisan and racial gerrymandering in our state and give back Black voters that representation across North Carolina that they need to see. Because right now we know that's where our party is struggling the most, is making sure that gerrymandered states have access to a ballot box and have access to representation like they need to, especially Black voters across the South right now.
Let me get you on something. Well, Actually, we are out of time. Anderson Clayton, as always, thank you very much for coming to The Last Word tonight.
Thank you.
That is tonight's Last Word.